Thanks to our title sponsor, Juniper Networks, for helping make Research Saturday possible. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts, tracking down the threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems of protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
Noberus is probably one of the most kind of prevalent ransomware threats we've seen over the last year or so. So the fact that it's been around for a year is actually probably almost notable at this point because many ransomware families now have kind of a shorter lifespan than that at the moment.
That's Brigid O Gorman. She's a senior intelligence analyst with Symantec's Threat Hunter team. The research we're discussing today is titled Noberus Ransomware. Darkside and BlackMatter Successor continues to evolve its tactics. Well, they also have an interesting history here. Can you walk us through some of the background?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Noberus definitely has an interesting history. For those who may not be familiar with the name, Noberus is a name we use for the ransomware that's also very commonly called BlackCat or ALPHV. And this ransomware, as I said, first appeared in November 2021, and it sort of sparked, I suppose, interest at the time because it was written in Rust. And that was the first time we'd seen a ransomware that was written in that language being kind of professionally deployed, sort of in ransomware attacks like this. And Rust is kind of an interesting language. It's very secure, and it's also cross-platform. So it would mean the ransomware could potentially be ported over and used on other platforms if the attackers or the developers wanted to do that. But also, yeah, the kind of background of Noberus then is that it's essentially the successor to the Darkside and BlackMatter ransomware families, and is believed to be developed by the same group, which is a group that Symantec tracks as Coride, but which is also, commonly known as Fin7 as well. And obviously Darkside would be a name, I think, familiar to a lot of people, anyone who kind of follows cybersecurity news, because that is the group that was behind the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack back in May 2021, which sort of drew a lot of heat onto the group at the time, I suppose. And that's what led it to rebrand as BlackMatter. And then they've subsequently rebranded now as Noberus, as basically the latest rebrand of that group's ransomware, essentially.
So my understanding is that this is operated as a ransomware as a service type of thing here. And they do have some specific rules for their affiliates. Can you take us through some of that?
Yeah, so that's it. Noberus is operated as a ransomware as a service, which I'm sure obviously most listeners to this podcast will understand what that means. But basically it means, Coride, they're the developers of Noberus. They control the ransomware, control the malware, but then the attacks are essentially carried out by what is known as affiliates. So basically other groups who actually infiltrate the victims, the companies, and deploy the ransomware on their networks. And most ransomware developers who operate these kind of programs, they do tend to have rules about how the ransomware can be used. And that's generally in an effort to, prevent them from coming under too much scrutiny, shall we say. So Noberus, like many ransomware families, one of its rules is that it can't be deployed in the Commonwealth of Independent States or neighboring countries, which essentially are the, ex-Soviet states in Russia, basically. And they also say it can't be deployed on healthcare organizations or nonprofits. And they also advise against attacking the education and government sectors. And as you said, these are all essentially to avoid their attacks drawing, too much attention. And obviously, Coride, that develops Noberus, I suppose, was stung in the past with its attack on the Colonial Pipeline, drawing so much attention on it at the time. So those are kind of the main rules. The gang is interesting. It doesn't seem to have any, issue with kind of dropping affiliates if it feels they kind of aren't, performing up to what the level they expect or bringing in enough money basically for them. They will get rid of affiliates, it seems, fairly easily if they feel they're not doing a good enough job, essentially.
Well, let's dig into some of the technical capabilities here. Can you walk us through what exactly is it capable of?
Yeah, well, Noberus it's kind of interesting. It underlines, I guess, for its affiliates, what it's capable of doing. So, it creates a unique entrance to its own onion domain for each attack that takes place. It also offers, encrypted negotiation chats that can only be accessed by the intended victim. And that's something that seems to have become kind of more of a priority for ransomware gangs over the last couple of months of the year, I would say as well. They really want to keep these negotiation chats private and prevent them being infiltrated by law enforcement or security researchers, I think. Also, one of the most interesting things I think about Noberus is that it actually offers 4 encryption modes. So it offers full encryption, fast encryption, dot pattern, and smart pattern encryption. Now, full encryption is obviously the most self-explanatory. It's the most secure, but it's also obviously the slowest mode of encryption. The most interesting one, I think, is the smart pattern encryption, because this basically is also known as intermittent encryption in other iterations by other ransomware groups. And it basically offers encryption of a certain percentage of megabytes in percentage increments. Now, by default, for Noberus, it encrypts with a strip of 10 megabytes every 10% of the file starting from the header. And they say this is kind of the optimal mode for attackers in terms of both speed and also cryptographic strength. And Sentinel Labs actually published a report about this kind of encryption recently, where they refer to it as intermittent encryption, and they said how it was used by Noberus. It's also used by BlackBaster. It's also used by the Play ransomware, which is one of the newer ransomware families as well. And I think it's quite interesting because it nearly seems to be used at the moment by ransomware families as nearly a bit of a selling point. The fact that if their ransomware is capable of deploying this intermittent encryption, they're kind of using it as a selling point to try and get affiliates to use their ransomware, because they're saying, they're capable of encrypting files quicker than other ransomware if they have to deploy full ransomware, or full encryption, I should say, and that kind of thing. So I think that's quite an interesting part of Noberus's operation.
Juniper Connected Security helps organizations build threat-aware networks that extend security to every point of connection across the network. To learn more, visit juniper.net/security or connect with Juniper on Twitter or Facebook. That's juniper.net/security.
MISI, the Maryland Innovation and Security Institute, is hosting Cyber Saturday focused on industrial control systems October 15th, 2022 at their headquarters facility in Columbia, Maryland. They invite all students in 6th grade through college sophomores interested in learning about cybersecurity, ICS SCADA, penetration testing, software development, and more for a fun-filled day of hands-on exercises and activities. Come turn out the lights on the critical infrastructure city, program a robot, capsize a boat, alter their IoT HomeKit, and much more. For more information, visit misiacademy.tech, and we thank Maryland Innovation and Security Institute for sponsoring our show. Yeah, that is really an interesting aspect of it. Help me understand here. I mean, so are they basically, sprinkling the encryption throughout the files so they only have to encrypt a small percentage of it? Does that work on the flip side as well? If someone pays the ransom and wants to decrypt, do they get their files back faster?
I presume they probably would, because now I'm not sure on that. But I presume because there will be less of the file to decrypt, that it should decrypt faster. But I guess the point of the intermittent encryption is that while the full file isn't encrypted, the file is still useless essentially. So from the perspective of you as the victim, the file is fully encrypted and you can't access it. So from your perspective, it's still just as serious as the full encryption. But from the attacker's perspective, it doesn't take as much time. And that's obvious, that is the main point, we think, of the intermittent encryption, because obviously the longer attackers are on a system, the longer it takes for them to encrypt these files, the more chance of their activity being intercepted, and the more chance that they may not be able to complete the attack, which is obviously what they want to do.
Now, is it correct that Noberus has sort of different tiers for the level of affiliates? If you do well for them, they'll give you access to some enhanced tools?
Yeah, it does seem that Noberus are quite focused on attracting, I suppose, strong affiliates to their team, affiliates that are capable of carrying out, serious kind of high money attacks. Because as I said, they've no issue with culling affiliates if they're not bringing in enough money. And they did in December last year, December 2021, they added a new, what they called a plus role for affiliates that had brought in more than 1.5 million US dollars. And this gave them access to basically, I suppose, extra capabilities, gave them access to kind of a DDoS capability to basically Noberus's botnet if they wanted to carry out DDoS attacks, as well as giving them access to their brute force kind of capabilities that made it possible for them to brute force NTDS or Kerberos tickets and other hashes for free and things like that. So it does seem that, Noberus is definitely focused on kind of attracting these highly skilled affiliates to work with them. Seems to be quite a priority for them.
One of the things that your research highlights here is the XMatter data exfiltration tool. Walk us through that. What are the capabilities there?
Yeah, I thought this was quite interesting. So we saw this activity in August, so not too long ago, where basically we saw a heavily updated version of the XMatter data exfiltration tool being used alongside Noberus in ransomware attacks. And XMatter was actually discovered by Symantec researchers in November 2021. And at that point, it was being used alongside the BlackMatter ransomware. So this is also obviously another indication of the kind of links between Noberus and BlackMatter as well. And XMatter is designed basically to steal specific file types from a number of selected directories. It then uploads these to an attacker-controlled server, and then the ransomware is deployed on victim networks. And even at the time when we found XMatter, first back in November 2021, there were various variants of the tool in existence then, because even initially its developers were kind of continuously refining it seemed, in order to optimize its operation, in order to expedite exfiltration of kind of, a sufficient volume of this high value data as quickly as they could. Again, speed being one of the goals for ransomware actors too. But this latest version of XMatter, it's actually reduced the number of file types it attempts to exfiltrate down further than even what it was. So, it attempts to exfiltrate, I suppose, unsurprising files with extensions like PDF, .doc, .xls, JPEG files, text files, SQL files, message files, zip files. All those kind of files are still what they're looking to exfiltrate. They've also added some other new features. They've added a third exfiltration capability, FTP, to the SFTP and WebDAV capabilities that were present in older versions. They've also added the ability to build a report that can list all process files. They've also added the ability to corrupt process files. Interestingly as well, I thought they've added a self-destruct capability or configuration option, which when it's enabled will basically make the tool self-destruct and quit if it's executed in a non-corporate environment. So obviously that's kind of a non-analysis step it's taken there to, in case it suspects it's being deployed on a sandbox or anything like that. And as well as this, the malware itself was extensively rewritten, and even its existing features were kind of implemented differently. So it's likely that that's all a bit to avoid detection. Unsurprisingly, as obviously there's detections in place for the original XMatter tool. But it's quite an interesting tool. I mean, it's not 100% clear if XMatter is developed by Corey itself or if it's developed by one of the affiliates that use Corey's ransomware. But it's obviously notable that it's been used alongside both BlackMatter and Noberus as well.
And another thing that you all tracked here was evidently Noberus was trying to steal some credentials from some backup software. Yeah,
this was kind of interesting as well. So this was, again, at least one of the affiliates that was using a Noberus ransomware recently. Again, this actually happened in August as well. So August seemed to be kind of an active month for affiliates deploying Noberus. But they were using information stealing malware that's specifically designed to steal credentials that are stored by the Veeam backup software. Now, Veeam is a software that's capable of storing credentials for a wide range of systems, including notably domain controllers and also cloud services. And these credentials are stored to, facilitate the backup of these systems. And the malware that was deployed was called infosealer.amfo. And basically it's designed to connect to the SQL database where Veeam stores these credentials, and then it steals them with a SQL query, essentially. It can then decrypt these credentials and then displays them to the attackers, of course. So AMFO, it's not a new tool. It does seem to have been around since last year, around August 2021. And there is evidence it has previously been used by attackers who have deployed the Yan Luang and the Lockbit ransomware families. And there was also a report from BlackBerry recently, just a couple of weeks ago, that also detailed AMFO being used alongside a new ransomware strain as well, that it was calling Monty, which it said appears to be based on the leaked source code of the Conti ransomware. And the TTPs that were used in these Monty attacks so closely resemble former Conti attack chains. So it's possible that Conti were also behind these Monty attacks as well. So they may be former affiliates of the group. And of course, as we know, Conti was shut down in May, and many of the former affiliates are now working with other ransomware families. And I mean, among that is Noberus as well. Like ex-Conti affiliates are believed to be deploying Noberus now as well. So it's possible that that's what we're seeing here. So stealing these credentials from Veeam, it is a known technique. It allows for privilege escalation, lateral movement. Basically gives the attackers access to more data to exfiltrate, to more machines to encrypt as well. And something notable as well in these attacks we saw where AMFO was used was also a relatively old rootkit scanner called Gmer was also used. And this can be used by ransomware actors to kill processes. And it's interesting because it's quite an old tool, but it has been seen used in a few ransomware attacks recently. So it does seem to be something that ransomware attackers are leveraging a bit at the moment as well.
Well, based on the information that you all have gathered here, what are your recommendations? How should folks best protect themselves?
I think the usual, I suppose, kind of recommendations apply, when it comes to ransomware attacks. I think the advice doesn't generally change about these kind of things. It's ensuring you have your backups in place, so you have good, comprehensive security solution in place that can help protect you from, it's not only a case of blocking the malware often for ransomware attacks. Like sometimes if it's a case, if you're blocking the ransomware, it's nearly too late. It's kind of trying to spot the kind of pre-ransomware activity that can be very important for preventing these ransomware attacks. So it's really to make sure you're taking all the steps to avoid these ransomware attacks, that you have that good security solution in place that will hopefully spot this activity before the ransomware has a chance to be deployed on your systems, really.
Our thanks to Brigid O Gorman from Symantec for joining us. The research is titled Noberus Ransomware. Darkside and BlackMatter Successor continues to evolve its tactics. We'll have a link in the show notes.
Thanks to Juniper Networks for sponsoring our show. You can learn more at juniper.net/security or connect with them on Twitter or Facebook.
The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Rachel Gelfin, Liz Irvin, Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karpf, Eliana White, Paru Prakash, Justin Sabi, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week.